The Fuel, Move, Recover podcast is brought to you by Advancing Athletics. If you would like to join us, go to advancingathletics.com and click the sign up button. The FMR team is dedicated to helping both individuals and our communities. While our primary objective is to improve the lives of law enforcement, first responders, and the military, we welcome everyone. This podcast will allow you to become a part of the FMR family, but the topics we discuss are not clinical recommendations or medical advice. Enjoy the show. Howdy, everyone. Welcome to the Fuel, Move, Recover podcast. This is episode 1. My name is Michele Iono. I'm joined by my teammates, Alex Uding.
Hey.
And Lindsay Malone.
Hello.
So just as a reminder for you folks, this podcast and all things FMR are funded by our members over at fuelmoverecover.com. You can also get there by going to advancingathletics.com too. So that's our company, Advancing Athletics, that Fuel Move Recover is operated through. And we are so grateful for the patronage of our members because this is literally for them, for you. And most importantly, their support allows us to host free in-person seminars for local firefighters and first responders and law enforcement. And these servicemen and women who would otherwise not have access to this kind of elite level performance and wellness program, we're able to offer it to them because of our members. So we hope that you can join us in supporting these fine folks. But either way, as members or listeners, Lindsay, Alex, and I feel deeply that you guys are part of our family. And every family should make time to break bread or have a drink and talk about their day. So, Alex, what are you drinking and how's your day going?
I'm drinking Harpoon's Rec League. It's a Happy Hazy Light. I got it actually from Michele. He was kind enough for my birthday to send me a beer subscription because the first few recordings we did, I brought water to the table and that was not cutting
Unacceptable.
it. So,
Unacceptable.
But Michele actually gave me my beer education when we were in grad school. He asked me what kind of beer I liked one day and I told him all beer tastes the same and he taught me otherwise. So this beer's for him. And today was good. I did a lot of work. We're filming a lot of videos for my clinic right now. So spent a lot of time in front of the camera, which is always awkward and weird and difficult, but it was fun. Got outside for a run. So it was a pretty good day. How was yours,
How's the
Lindsay?
weather?
It's good. It's like in the mid 60s, low 70s, which is like perfect weather for me. So it's been nice here. We actually got a spring this year.
Oh, yeah. Sometimes it goes like right from winter to summer. That's what I feel like it's doing here. We haven't really gotten much of a spring.
Yeah, definitely not. But today, it definitely is now summer because it is hot as hell now.
Yeah. And humid. Very humid. Yeah, my day was good. I took the kids to the pool this afternoon. And so that was nice. Like, definitely got a workout in doing that, chasing 3 kids around a pool when none of them are really good swimmers. I really had to like be on my game. But yeah, it was a good day. And I'm drinking Market Garden Chinook Strike. Have you guys had this?
Yes.
It's an IPA. It's good. I mean, I really don't think they make a bad beer. It's a little what's the word I'm looking for? It is kind of earthy tasting, but I like it. So I like IPAs for the most part.
Lindsay, do you have any idea where the brewmaster for Market Garden went to college?
I'm going to guess Worcester or...
Sounds like a good school. Really, really good school. For listeners out there, that's where I went to college. So great minds think alike.
But Cleveland has a really good beer scene. I mean, Like you could be in different parts of town and there are like good breweries, like microbrews just about everywhere.
Yeah. Lindsay, it's so crazy. When I lived there just, well, I guess just quote unquote 12 years ago, like there was nothing. There was
Yeah.
the only thing right when I first moved, right when I was first leaving, there was a brewery opened up on Cedar Lee, right by the theater.
Oh yeah.
I don't even know. Is it even there anymore?
There is one. If it has been there 12 years, time has like flown by.
Yeah.
But there is a brewery, and if you've ever seen the movie Monsters, Inc., I know this is like putting me in a specific category. There are, there's like doors everywhere in that movie, and that bar, as part of their decoration, they have just like old doors. So if you've had a few too many of the beers there, you may get a little confused with all the doors everywhere.
That's awesome.
I can't think of the name of it, but yeah, but now they're everywhere. I mean, you could go to any part of town, even the suburbs, like all have good breweries now.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really cool.
So what are you drinking, and how was your day?
I am drinking, finally. I'm drinking my last Spotted Cow from New Glarus Brewing Company. So, New Glarus is this brewery out of Wisconsin, and they only sell their beer in Wisconsin. And Alex was kind enough when she was driving through from Chicagoland to Rhode Island, she stopped by. She stopped by here and she brought me a 6-pack of this, and that was like in February. And this I've been saving this final one for our first episode tonight. So here we are. So I'm enjoying that. That's really good. And my day was good. Now that we're launched, there's all just kinds of small administrative stuff to do, and like knick-knack stuff. And so doing things like that and doing some more creative stuff. And with us, with our preparation for the Ohio Tactical Officers Association presentations next week. So I've just been doing some work on that kind of stuff. And same thing, went out for a run as usual, and did a little work in the garden. So we're trying to get everything. I think we finally have everything in. We've planted like 200 tomato plants, and like just these absurd amounts. Like we have like 250 garlic plants and stuff like that. So,
All right, I know where to get them.
yeah. So yeah, absolutely. If you guys need any of that, you just need to drive south a little bit. Alex will have to mail you yours. So
it's kind of a good segue into today's topic of like eating fresh, eating good foods, eating vegetables. So like, well done with the gardening. Did you plan that? Or?
Yeah, absolutely, I did. But we do have to talk about nipple chafing before we move on to our topic for the day. I feel like I'm a champion for nipple chafing now, and I finally have a solution. So all the shirts that I wear, as a typical male, are like baggy on me, and it's the rubbing. It has to be. So now I tie my shirts like a high school cheerleader, and then I tuck the tail, the tied part, the twisted part, into my underwear, and now my nipples are like so fresh, so clean. So that's a hot tip.
You need one of those little like the circles. Do you remember those where you would actually like pull your shirt through it so you wouldn't have to worry about tying a knot? That was
Isn't hair ties?
Yeah, you could do that.
Okay, well I don't have any of those, so
I was just saying, like, watching marathons, like as a kid, that would be like the most perplexing thing to me. Is like, why are all these men like bleeding through their shirt? I never understood it.
Yeah, we're really an underserved population, I feel like. So, it's I'm really happy to be a part of the solution. Yeah, I really feel like I'm really breaking ground here. But yeah, because otherwise it was every single like kind of shirt, long sleeve shirts and tank tops and cut off t-shirts. I guess I'm that's all encompassing when I say every kind of
I
t-shirt.
thought you were going to say your solution was like a deep, deep tank, like where it's just like a string
Yeah,
and then
just the
goes into your armpit where it just bypasses.
my muscle
Like a
shirt. Yeah,
wrestling,
just
like
my
a
nipples are
wrestling
exposed.
suit. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I've just started wearing a singlet. That's my solution. So, I'm not quite yet to the point in my fitness journey where I'm comfortable wearing a wrestling singlet while running, but at least I know there's another step beyond this if the high school cheerleader, hair tie thing doesn't work. Lindsay, why don't you give us a summary of what you wrote about this week? Let's talk about that.
Yeah, so I wrote about food and fueling for optimal physical and mental health, and just sort of teasing out kind of what it means to eat well so that you're putting the right things in your body for, whatever you want to be doing. And I think, most people sort of recognize that nutrition affects the way that they feel, but sort of as like a backseat kind of thing. Like it's not super important. It really doesn't make all that much a difference as long as I'm not eating, like donuts or chips or whatever. But, eating really good food and all the nutrients that comes with it really determines how your body functions, right? So like if you want to think, problem solve and be at the top of your game mentally and physically, you really have to put the right stuff in. And, with that, if people hear that, then they're thinking like complicated, or, it's got to be all these different steps or eating only salads or something like that. It really doesn't have to be. So, sort of at a very like basic level, you have to eat food, right? And people are like, well, what does that mean? Eating food? Like, of course. But we have sort of come, over the last, I don't know, maybe 50 years, or actually probably more like 60, 70 years now. Food has changed, right? Like half the things in the supermarket have like 40, 50 ingredients, and our grandparents or great grandparents would have never recognized these things as food. So like think about like a Pop-Tart or a Twinkie or I'm just trying to think through a Go-Gurt tube, right? That you see at the store. And, most people would be like, what is that? Right. And now we think like, oh, it's like part of breakfast or maybe an afternoon snack. And what those things are missing are the nutrients that like fuel your body, whether it's like your immune system, your nervous system, your, muscles for activity. And so a lot about eating well is really choosing food. So what that means are things that are items in the grocery store usually having one ingredient, right? So things you would find in the produce section. So spinach, celery, cucumbers, apples, or on other sort of perimeter areas of the grocery store, eggs, cheese, um, chicken, whatever. So thinking about these single ingredient foods are really those things that are truly foods and really have a lot of nutritional value.
So Lindsay, can you just really quickly explain why Pop-Tarts and why what else did you say? Go-Gurt and Twinkies.
Ramen noodles.
Ramen noodles. Can you explain why that shit just tastes so good and why?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things to think about is we are sort of biologically programmed to really like things that are easy to digest and that are a quick source of energy. So our sort of genetic makeup really still believes we're in sort of like a feast or famine kind of environment where we're not going to eat for a long time. So we really have to just pack in as many calories as possible very quickly in a very easy to digest manner, because who knows if we're going to be sort of chased by a bear here in the next like 20 minutes. So our DNA hasn't quite caught up with like where we are in terms of the food environment. So when you eat something like a Pop-Tart that has a mix of fat and sugar, it's very low in fiber, so it's easy to digest. Your brain sort of says like, yes, perfect. Lots of fuel in case I'm never going to eat, again. And those things just taste really good. And they've been designed to sort of set off sort of all these good signal. So sugar, for example, is really as addictive as cocaine. So when your brain gets sugar, it's like addictive, you want more, and it's really hard to get away from it unless you're not eating it at all. The other part of that is that it's really cheap to manufacture those things and they can sit on the shelf forever. I mean, if you ever have, something like this that's sitting in your pantry, it literally like never goes bad,
Have
right?
you heard, Lindsay, have you heard of that show called Eating History?
No.
It's on the History Channel, and what these two dudes, I think that's what it's called, Eating History. I have to look it up now. But and what they do is these guys get food from like they ate a like some biscuit thing from the Civil War, and it wasn't from it was a
A
replication, but it was
recipe
from
or whatever, yeah.
but well no, it was from like 1912. They had a reunion of like surviving soldiers, and so this thing was literally 108 years old, and they eat like rations from like World War II. And the one episode I saw, they were eating Fritos from like the 1980s.
Yeah, and like things are different and our taste buds and our brain sort of adapts to like, if you have more sugar or more salt, you become used to it and your threshold
Mm-hmm.
goes up. So if you're used to a lot of sugar or a lot of salt, so let's say you're eating Pop Tarts all the time, like a strawberry isn't going to taste that sweet to you. You're going to be like, oh, I need this really sweet thing. Uh, so all of these foods have really been sort of designed to be super appealing to your senses and sort of your prehistoric self. And so it's hard. They're addictive and they're all over. I mean, think about the supermarket. If I tell you, okay, only eat single ingredient foods, they're mostly on the perimeter. Probably that makes up like 20% of the grocery store. And I'm just making these numbers up, but I would venture to guess it's probably like 80-20. And then in the middle aisles of the grocery store, you have a mixture of simple carbohydrates, some sort of flour, sugar, salt, and fat, whether it's a breakfast cereal, a bar, a chip, something like that. And those foods are cheaper. So it is, it can get a little, complex if you think about it that way. But going back to, really trying to keep it simple, if you look for these foods that are just single ingredient items, it becomes a little bit easier. So, eating food, I love this quote from Michael Pollan, eating food, not too much, mostly plants. So, sticking with those things that our grandparents would recognize as foods. If you need a cheat sheet, it would be single ingredient. So, good example of this, you're in the cereal aisle and you have a canister of oats, like steel cut oats, one of those circular containers. And then you have these pouches of instant cinnamon oats. And you think like, well, what's really the difference there? They're probably the same. And then you flip over the package, you have oats, only ingredient in the canister. And then in the instant pouch, probably 20 sugar, salt, added vitamins that have been stripped during the processing. So trying to stick with that rules is a way to simplify, and you get to recognize like what those true foods are in the store. And then those things that are single ingredient, they're a lot harder to overeat. Like when was the last time you sat down and ate like 3 bowls of oatmeal versus like 3 bowls of Lucky Charms? Right? It's harder to do that.
I don't need to answer that, right?
So, these foods have fiber, they have protein, more so than the processed alternatives. So you automatically are getting those satisfaction signals. It's a lot easier to stop
Mm.
with the amount that you need versus overeating. So not too much means, eating what you need for whatever activities you have going on, and then mostly plants. So, there is a lot of focus on, maybe eating vegan or all plants. And I really, I don't think that's necessary unless you personally like feel good eating 100% plant-based diet. I mean, you can eat still very ethically and in line with recommendations for heart disease and cancer prevention and longevity by eating just mostly plants, like thinking of your animal protein as more of a garnish than the centerpiece of your meal. So instead of having, a grilled cheese and a salad. Maybe you're having like a little bit of cheese on top of your salad. So that's sort of the article in a nutshell, and really just trying to think of this idea that food is fuel. So if you really want good results in the back end, you have to be thinking about what's going in, right? So you wouldn't put, really crappy fuel in your sports car and think it's going to run the same as if you use really premium fuel. So a little bit of effort on the back end will pay off in dividends.
Yeah, I think that's so true. Like, I think it's sometimes bringing back the simplicity of it. Food's such an intricate part of our lives that we know we need it, and we know there's this thing as like eating well and not eating well. And sometimes the reasons that we make those decisions to perhaps not eat as well is multifactorial in terms of, is it time, is it economics, is it convenience, or is it lack of knowledge and just not knowing? And it's like what you grew up on. It was like, mom raised me on Pop-Tarts, of course that's just what I'm going to continue kind of moving forward. There's such a range and a spectrum of why we make like food choices, and kind of having those reminders of in the craziness of a day, I don't want to be thinking a ton about my food. Like, I already have enough I'm thinking about, like adding, for me personally, just saying, like, if I'm stressing about food too, that's another thing like on my list that is in my head that just, I don't know, is like revving me up. So if I can have those like 3 bullet points that you said, is it, what were they? Is it plant?
So eat food, not too much,
Yep.
mostly plants. Yeah.
Eat food, not too much, mostly plants. Like, if I have those 3 and that's like the thing I have in my head as I'm grocery shopping, and I only have to remember those 3 things, it keeps it a lot simpler. I'm not overthinking every decision I'm making as I'm walking through the grocery store. It's just like I pick up an item. If it checks off all 3 of those questions, it's like, okay, like this might be a good food choice for me. Just in starting off, it might just be a nice jumping off point.
The other thing too I think about is there's 2 things. Is that number one is that like perfect is the enemy of good, right? So like the title is optimizing fuel, for your well-being, for your physical and mental health, and the thing that people, I think, especially those of us that are like in the weeds, or folks, it's either folks on the top end or the beginning end, in that, because optimizing has this connotation of like best, like your best fueling, but I think it's also important that we highlight that better fueling can be an avenue of success also. So any decision that you make,
Yeah, and I think one of the things I feel like I've really learned in my clinical background is like, a lot of times if you give people a lot of recommendations, it's just overwhelming and then people do nothing. So even if you could do just one thing, so we were talking about, gardening earlier. I mean, if you could do one thing, it's like on your plate, every time you eat, there should be something that you could potentially grow in a garden. Right. And that's always going to be a good choice. It may not be, you may have other things on there, but if you can start even there, then you're checking off a lot of those boxes. Single ingredient, mostly plants. It's really hard to overeat things like fruits and vegetables because they have so much fiber that, they're going to fill you up.
Yeah. And I also think from, with me being the recover lead of our team, I think that the other thing that I was going to mention was that you don't want to have to recover from your meals. So the point is that your meals are supposed to complement what you do during the day and allow you to have the energy or the restorative power to overcome whatever it is that you do during the day, especially if you're working swing shifts, or even if you're not swinging between shifts but working midnights, and you're doing, even if you're working during the day, a lot of these tactical folks are doing unusual things, these high stress environments, and putting themselves into these precarious positions in the normal course of the line of duty. And so by choosing your fuel properly, it allows you to for what you're eating to complement your day, or to restore what you lost during the day, instead of having foods that like bog down your processing, right, Lindsay?
Yeah, I mean, you want to think about like, how am I going to feel on the back end of this? Because at first, like, you're hungry, you want things that taste good, of course, but as you're sort of progressing through, you want to think like, how do I want to feel? Is this going to be the type of meal or snack or whatever that I'm going to just be in a carb coma or something, sit on the couch for an hour? And most of us would say like, no, I don't want to feel that way. But it does take a little bit of a pause, which we are not programmed to do, right? Like if you're hungry, you're just like wanting to eat. So, asking yourself that question as you go through, like, how do I want to feel on the back end of this? And if you're tired because you've been working late, chances are you may not feel great, and you don't want to feel worse on the back end of that. Like, you want something that's going to fuel that sort of challenging time.
I think too, I really like that you brought up, like sometimes when there's too many options or too much knowledge thrown at someone, it's hard to know where to actually begin. And I think with all of us, as we kind of introduce our different areas, I think we all really believe in that, because so much of what we're talking about here is adapting lifestyle changes or adapting different mindsets and approaches to how maybe someone is physically active, how someone is eating, how someone is recovering. That in shifting your mindset, it just has it. The small, simple things are a great starting point. Like it's the place where if you can take the time to actually change the way you think about a situation. So for me, like if I'm talking about movement, someone might feel that they are going to get fit if they do a certain type of workout, but that might not be your starting point. And there's a lot of ways to get there. There's a lot of different ways to get there. And I want the person to recognize that they are capable of doing things. We just have to discover what those things are that are going to get them active, and shift that mindset that it doesn't have to look a certain way just because a lot of maybe successful people have done that, or people that look a certain way or move a certain way do that. It's starting out with where you're at, and it's meeting you where you're at, and shifting your mindset so you can get empowered to make these lifestyle changes, to make these really difficult things. It's not easy to shift your mindset. It's not easy to move a different way, to eat a different way, to recover a different way. But once you do it, it just becomes part of you. And if we want it to become ingrained, I think it's starting simple allows us to build a good foundation that lasts, so it's sustainable.
It gets them like confidence, because how many people have you talked to or that have started some very strict eating plan that may actually be great for you, but it's so strict that you do it for 3 days or 4 days, and then you totally fall off the wagon. That really doesn't do anyone any good. So even just like starting with one thing, even like shifting like one choice, gives you some momentum, some confidence that you can actually do it. But yeah, with food, it is hard because food is, it's part of our culture. It's how you grew up. There's different feelings tied to what you're eating, and it's difficult to change that for sure.
Yeah, and I think another thing, like it is like I know some of this stuff kind of sounds like touchy-feely, but they're like legit things. Like it's a legit mental skill to learn how to eat mindfully, And I try to do this too, and it's like just put the damn fork down, like while you're eating, It's like just one time while, rather than shoveling everything in as fast as you can, like just stop. That's really been a hard thing for me. I remember the first date I ever went on. I took her the two fanciest restaurants in town were Applebee's and Red Lobster. And Red Lobster is like an anniversary date. You would never take a first date, to Red Lobster, So we went to Applebee's, and I don't remember what I ordered, but I did not look up until I was done, and it maybe took like 2 minutes for me to finish eating. And she had just started, and I was like, "What's wrong with your food? Oh, you don't like it?" I had absolutely no concept of no concept at all of like what mindful eating was, and I still struggle with that now because, so many of us get that like stuffed feeling. It's like, oh my God, what did I just do to myself? Because, kind of like you talk about like the gut. I mean, it's a real thing. Again, these aren't like touchy-feely things. Like there is a nervous system that is solely dedicated to connecting our digestive tract to our brains. So that's not instantaneous. So it needs time. Your brain needs time to catch up to your stomach. And
Yeah,
so if
absolutely.
if you can at least just slow down a little bit, at least that should help stop from overeating. Again, this is like trying to be better.
Yeah, and I think, if most people don't even realize how fast they eat, but the next time you eat, just set a timer. Just start a timer. Now that's, it's not a perfect experiment because now you're timing yourself, but you still would be surprised. I mean, most people are finished in less than 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And no one
But
would ever
again,
guess that. You would think like, oh, it's a half an hour. No,
yeah.
it's usually around like 10 minutes or less.
But
And it
that would be
takes
even
15 minutes for your stomach to tell your brain like, hey, I'm full.
yeah.
So
But that's great, Lindsay. Sorry to interrupt, but like that's great, about the whole self-experiment thing, because then you would be aware of it. Again, we don't want you to be consumed with a clock while you're eating,
right.
but at least you would start to have some awareness. What I tell my clients a lot is that it doesn't have to be perfect, but it should be on purpose. Alex, what were you going to say?
Oh, I was just going to reference Lindsay's article because she actually puts a hunger scale on there. And so I think sometimes people aren't even in tune with like their hunger signals and stuff because, again, some of it can be they're eating so fast. So if you can reference her article, there's a great picture and a great guide that can kind of, if you're not sure how you should be feeling, it kind of indicates it for you. So again, like Michele said, and Lindsay, a great kind of self-experiment at home is time yourself, put yourself on that scale and kind of see where you're at with it. So I think that's great.
Yeah, and I think, in our like culture, the other thing to be aware of is we have certain occasions where it is like perfectly acceptable for people to eat like continuously and really ignore, like almost encouraged the ignoring of any sort of like hunger or fullness. So obviously like we think about holidays, but then also think about like sporting events, right? Like watching a game or something and there's tons of food and the idea is like you're just sitting around eating. And I'm not saying that's not enjoyable, but it is sort of acceptable, maybe even encouraged to like disconnect with hunger and fullness. And that I think can be problematic if you're really trying to be your best, every day. And I'm sure most of you listening have had an alcohol hangover and you can have a food hangover for sure, right? Like just your body kind of processing all those things. So the hunger scale is great to use kind of day to day and also to think about, different events that you go to where like it's okay if you're not hungry, like you don't need to eat. It's hard to work against that, but it takes time and no one's perfect. So even just working towards, perfecting that skill or improving that skill, I think is a great starting point.
Can you talk, Lindsay, at all about, in your experience, the difference between how people respond, like when they start to make changes, like how did how do those changes manifest mentally versus physically? Like, do they feel sharper or, mentally, or are there like, what is the evidence that you've seen, like when you work with somebody to improve, their feeling, like how do those two things kind of work together?
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone reacts a little bit differently, but I think many people sort of come in or come to me feeling, I sort of joke about this is from Dr. Hyman that I used to work with. He would say FLC syndrome, feel like crap syndrome, that most people are walking around with. Just tired, maybe not having a whole lot of energy, digestion, sort of a mess, like a lot of bloating and that kind of thing. And so when you change your diet, I think there's a lot of different things that take place, but most people report like sleeping better, more energy, better digestion. And some people, just sort of think having heartburn, having a slow digestive tract, being bloated is normal, or being gassy is normal. And, a lot of those things are things that can be changed, improved with what you're eating and how much you're eating. So I think people notice those changes, energy level, sleeping, and then less puffiness. So a lot of inflammation can be connected to food and to your gut health. And even in as few as, 24 to 48 hours, you can really change your gut microbiome with what you're eating. So the bacteria that lives in your gut, and that can translate into reduced inflammation. So, people might notice their rings fitting a little bit better, maybe no lines on their ankles when they take off their socks. So those sorts of things. And then you mentioned like mental, I think there's a couple of things that go on there, but one for sure, like clearer, sharper thinking is one, and that directly relates to your gut health. And, so if your gut's a mess, your mental functioning is also going to be a mess because you have that connection there. Um, and the other is when you've made a decision to be healthier, to make some changes, I think there's a lot. That happens in terms of like mentally, you say like, I'm doing something different, I'm going to feel different, right? And we know that the body like then participates in that process. In research, it's known as the placebo effect, but if you really look at it, it's really your body responding to what you think is going to happen and actually physically changing. So I think that goes into it too. Like people automatically feel better because you feel more in control of what's happening and how you're feeling, and that you've made a decision to do something differently.
I think that's great. And I know from like the movement side and like the PT side, if I get a new person and we're discussing things, asking questions about, reaction time, concentration, energy levels, performance duration, like are there dips in their performance? When are those occurring, like during the timing of your event? When I'm asking about bone health, when I'm asking about menstruation cycles and all these different things, when I'm looking at the pelvic floor, constipation is a really big deal with that. There are certain triggers where when I ask the question, I'm like, nutrition might really be playing a role with a lot of this. And I would argue that nutrition's huge. Education is just big for almost anyone because there's certainly improvements we can all make. And so being aware of that, and maybe someone's coming into me because of performance, but I can't leave that nutrition piece out because that nutrition piece is going to enhance their performance and improve whatever I can do to help them. So I think it's really important, like learning how to integrate these things and respecting these things. And maybe you're seeing a difference in performance and nutrition's not like the light bulb that's going off in your head, but maybe you're getting hurt and you're repeatedly getting hurt because of something connected to nutrition, because you're not fueling a proper way. So your body's having to compensate to make up for lack of certain things. So I think it's really important, like even if you don't think maybe nutrition is a component of something that you might need to work on, if you're coming in for, because you got hurt or something like that, it's certainly as a practitioner in the back of my head where I want them to recognize like, it plays a big role in their life. And it's something we're going to talk about a little bit or refer someone to because we know it's going to enhance their performance. So it's just this interesting connection. Lack of nutrition, like we see how it affects movement all the time. We see how it affects a person's performance. And when that fixes itself, just the shift that it can make. So even if nutrition is not the thing that drives you and you just want to perform your job really well, pain-free, and that's the driver, we have to consider nutrition still. So it's just interesting how it's all just sliding and it's all connected. And that's what I think I'm so excited about with this, is that we all have our perspective, and it's about integrating all these different things, because ultimately it's all these different things that combine to make your performance and to help our listeners thrive.
Yeah, and I think the other another good point, another good part to that is that similar with me in the clinic, like trying to encourage that, because a lot of the musculoskeletal stuff that we work on, or that we work on helping people correct, like that takes time, right? But you can change a lot of your dietary patterns almost immediately.
Yeah, and there's so much that goes, like, when you think about what people come to you for, like aches, pains, stiffness, mobility issues, inflammation plays such a role in all those things. And you can have inflammation from overuse, but you can also, I mean, there's so much that diet plays a role in there. I worked with a physician who did laparoscopic surgery, and he would have to use his hands in a certain way all the time, and they were feeling sort of uh, achy and swollen. And he and I worked on some research together for particular type of for prostate cancer, and overhauling diet for that. And he changed his diet and added curcumin, which is a spice extract that is a potent anti-inflammatory. And just with the diet change and that supplement, the pain in his hands completely went away. Like something that would be impacting his job, his ability to do his job, never connected with food or diet. And it changed. I mean, it's like amazing. So one thing that I like, and you guys probably use something similar, is I have a symptom questionnaire, because humans, we're really good at black and white, but gray is not a good area for us to recognize change. So rating your symptoms in terms of severity and frequency, and then making one or two changes and seeing, maybe I was having knee pain or back pain or whatever, for 4 out of 7 days of the week, and it was severe, and now I'm having it 2 days a week and it's really pretty mild. You may otherwise think, like, I still have back pain, but then when you look at those two things, you can say, like, wow, this really is making a difference. And I think that's a good tool for people who are maybe a little bit skeptical. Is nutrition really going to do anything for me?
Absolutely. I completely agree with that. It's learning. I think, we've grown up in a system where everything has its own box. And I think that plays into like the whole black and white thing. And so it's like, oh, I go to Lindsay to talk about food. She's not here to talk about my pain and things like that. And then maybe receiving that questionnaire and she's asking me about my pain. And suddenly it's like, oh, maybe there is a connection here. And like you said, if you can suddenly see that the changes that you're making with your food decisions is then affecting your pain, that's a really strong message being sent in understanding the connection. I don't think it's anyone's fault for not seeing it or knowing about it, because again, we have these boxes of people we go to for different things, that sometimes just our mind, then it's easier to just kind of be like, oh, this is the person for that. They don't care about my other issues. This is the person for that. They're not going to care if I'm pooping or not. Like it all is connected though. And so I think that's such a good point. And hopefully everyone who's working with different practitioners has things like this where we can create a dialogue amongst each other.
Yeah. And you think about somebody who has back pain 4 days a week. I mean, the math is pretty simple, right? So 4 out of 7 versus 2 out of 7. Like, not only is that obvious from a numerical standpoint, but also like maybe if we could get your pain down to 3 days or 2 days, then that's the difference from like you feeling like you're able to maintain your quality of life, or you're able to do your job still. Because the problem, the way that we think about things is that if you're compensating all the time, or having to change even, quote unquote compensation. That's what we look at as physiotherapists. But if you're having to change what you do, even if it's just the quantity of what you do, then you're going to start to build up this film, this patina on your movement patterns or on your ability to recover. And whereas if you only have pain once a week or a couple times a week, well, maybe we can identify what those things are, because now you've gotten rid of the overall inflammatory response from your poor diet habits or, your poor recovery techniques. Right now we're talking about dietary habits, but, putting those pieces together, well, we might identify something that you're doing wrong and incorrectly that was unrelated, and you just thought it was related because you had this omnipresent symptom, So by cutting that down, you may not even need services at all, because you've corrected it from, you've nipped it in the bud without even having to make those mechanical changes, or at least you're maintaining your quality of life while you're also working on changing some of these other lifestyle things.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much that you can do. I mean, I think people have this perception that, if I have this problem, I'm destined for surgery or I have to do something really drastic. And there's so many different avenues. And I really believe the body is just like amazing at being able to be resilient and change, adapt. So you look at even something like, a knee replacement, which is a pretty common surgery. I mean, you can delay it, for several years with lifestyle, losing weight, changing what you're eating, changing how you're moving. Like you're able to make some shifts that really can improve functionality, pain, quality of life, all of these things. Now, you may not be able to reverse the damage that's been done, but the point is just like I think anything is really possible with lifestyle change.
But not only that, Lindsay, is that I'll take it a step further and say that I see a noticeable difference in my patients that do have positive mental health. They don't have any really obvious like mental issues from a standpoint of like they don't have good self-efficacy, so they don't believe that they can do things. So their rehab, when they actually do have that knee replacement, takes even longer, and it's more arduous and more laborious, and they perseverate on the negatives and the pain, especially, and they're on their, it seems anecdotally that they might be on their medicine longer, or they might be longer to return to function. And so by taking care of your nutrition, you certainly will recover faster. So it by optimizing how you fuel, not only will it help you prevent some of these things, but when you do have to cross that threshold, it'll help you overcome it faster as well, to regain whatever lifestyle things that you had before or that you wanted to get back to.
Yeah. And it can be, just it, we were talking about, being difficult to change. And so like one just sort of final point on that, one thing that I talk to people about is, what is it costing you to not change? So we think
Mm-hmm.
about it's going to be uncomfortable. I'm going to have to do this a little differently. Um, and we are sort of creatures of habit, but, changing kind of one habit at a time, if you're not going to work towards eating better to maybe feel better or have clearer thinking or more energy or whatever, what is that costing you? Are you losing confidence in your own abilities at your job? Are you taking longer to problem solve or do projects or whatever because you feel like your cognitive functioning isn't 100%? And a lot of times those things can build, and that's where I do tend to see a lot of positive movement forward, is when people just get really uncomfortable in that space of, I'm carrying around too much extra weight, my knees are bothering me, or having a hard time doing the things I once could do. And that uncomfortableness is what, that's the cost every day. So that can be really motivating to change.
I think a big thing, underlying pattern that'll be kind of through this is, and it's certainly something I'm going to stress, is repeated repeated patterns of a particular component of any of this, so whether it's nutrition, recovery, or movement, leads to habituation to that thing. And so I think habit change, even though it has the word habit in it, it's introduction to variance. And so we have jobs, we have certain things in our life that require repeated things, and our body gets used to those repeated things. And then it reaches this point of discomfort, like you said, whether that's like any of those examples you gave, or this, I'm always moving the same way. And finally the area becomes sensitive the way I'm always moving, that body part is going to send a pain trigger because it no longer wants to do that. Like in teaching variance, in teaching, the different options that are out there, it just gives you the tool set to be able to move across your spectrum. Eat a variety of foods, or a variety of vegetables, eat colorful, eat, plants. There's so many different options there. You're introducing variety to that person's system, that they no longer are stuck in that way of always eating that they have. I want to introduce variety in someone's movement, so they're not repeatedly moving the same way, so their body is satisfied that it's getting what it needs in different directions and different habits. And then same thing with recovery. If we always get stressed about the same things, we're going to be in heightened alert when those stressors come at us. And if we can give variance in how we deal with different stressors and give options for that, we might not be as triggered to those things, because again, we've introduced different skill sets to be able to deal with repeated patterns.
So with that being said, Lindsay, is there any concluding thoughts or things that we haven't touched on that you want to hit on?
No, I mean, I think we've pretty much covered it all. I think you said this, and I'll just repeat it, that it doesn't have to be perfect. You just have to get started and sort of get on the merry-go-round, get started with some change, and action usually begets more action. So don't feel like you have to wait till you have the exact perfect plan, perfect meal, perfect recipe. Just start by making one, different choice at a time.
How about you, Alex? Any concluders or things that you haven't mentioned?
No, I completely agree with her. And if that's not enough and you're not sure where to begin, reach out to us. We're happy to kind of help in any way we can. That's why we're here for this. So we're excited to be able to provide that to you.
Yeah, and we have all that information listed on our site and in the description also of the podcast. So that, and we'll put that in the show notes. We'll make sure to put that in the show notes of each episode so that you guys can, help us defeat the evil internet robots that control who sees what. So, well, I guess that is it for episode 1. So, we're going to, and just to like a peek behind the curtain, we really want to try to respect your guys' time. You guys meaning being the listeners. So we're going to really try to keep the show at an hour. Right now, we're very humbly thankful to be able to start this and work together. And I think this was a hell of a way to start. So really great job, Lindsay, for that first one.
Thank you. It's been fun talking to everybody about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So more to come for sure. So just remember, guys, that FMR is entirely member funded. So we want to be able to give back to the local forces that protect and serve our communities. So your guys' memberships allow us to do that and allow us to keep this podcast going and the great content like what Lindsay put up. So if you'd like to help us, you can sign up, and so we've got 2 packages. We've got a $10 a month that will give you 2 months free if you sign up for the whole year. So it's just $99. And the other one is $30 a month. And you can participate in the webinars that we will be hosting every month. And also we will think of you as a producer of the podcast. So we'll let you have a shout out for either the department you work for, or if there's a local force that you want to support, if you're not actively serving, like none of the three of us are. How do you say neither, but for three people? Do either of you know? Is there a word?
Just keep going.
Trither? No. I'm leaving all this in, so I'm not. I do edit it, so I choose. So all this is getting left in. So okay, well, I'll figure that out for everybody before the next time. I guess the last thing is, just don't try to be perfect, and don't forget to pay yourself. You deserve to receive some of this betterment and this service that you guys give each other. So that's it, and goodbye for now.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
The Fuel, Move, Recover podcast is a product of Advancing Athletics, LLC. You can follow us on Instagram at Fuel, Move, Recover and Facebook at Advancing Athletics. This podcast is funded by our members at fuelmoverecover.com. Their membership is matched with free seminars on performance and wellness for underserved municipalities in Ohio and beyond. Come join the FMR family to improve your well-being while supporting others. The following departments and charities are the shout-outs of our patrons with Protect and Serve memberships. The Gary Sinise Foundation, the Stark County Sheriff's Office, the Task Force Dagger Foundation, and the Woonsocket, Rhode Island Police Department.